The defensive line commitments for Oregon in the class of 2023 are starting to trickle in. So we'll talk a little more about Terence Green and about McLaughlin Gardner as well. And a quick thought on Jurion Dickey, because I'm not worried, but I still think it's relevant to follow. And we dive into the mailbag on a Friday. Here we go.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin, D1 play-by-play broadcaster and lifelong Oregon Ducks fan. Thank you for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. Like, comment, subscribe wherever you're listening to or watching this show. Thank you to everybody out there who has done so already. This is Friday's show, August 5th. This is the last one I'm recording the day before. The next 2 weeks of shows I have already taped ahead of time. We're doing some game previews and looking at the schedule for Oregon football this year, because I'm going to be taking my last vacation of the summer. So if you want to get in touch with me, ask me a question or such, at Smalls_55 or at Locked On Ducks are the Twitter handles. YouTube comments, I should be able to monitor those as well, but maybe not quite as regularly. So go to Twitter if you want to ask a question. I'll just give you a response right there. But it's the last time that I'll go out for that long for quite some time. But rest assured, content will still continue to come your way on a show where this episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. Real quick, I just want to start with Jurion Dickey, because I want to say I'm not worried about him. I think having Dante Moore is huge. He has said, he was asked by Justin Hopkins of On3 the other day what he was thinking about. He said he's all in on Oregon. He's staying committed. Like, I'm not worried about it. But I talked about it and asked John Garcia on yesterday's show, because I do think it is worth monitoring, because he has become such a big name on the recruiting trail. I feel great about Oregon being able to get him to sign either in the early signing period or in February when it comes around, and keep him committed to the Ducks, because he's a really, really good-looking wide receiver, an NFL caliber wide receiver. I think that's the sort of player he can become. I'm not worried, but I've got a side eye on it, right? Just kind of like, just following, just like, what's going on? All right, we're good, still good. But I feel confident, feel fine. Don't want you to have any sense of panic like that. But it is just a verbal commitment. Other schools are going to try and come after him. I think Oregon's in a really good spot, but we're going to keep following it here on the show. We're also going to keep following the recruiting scene on the defensive line, because that's kind of where Oregon needs to go next. I think their offensive line are sort of the next recruiting targets that we're looking at here, in terms of where Dan Lanning and this staff need to be focusing the efforts on the recruiting trail. And a couple defensive line commits have come in. So I'll get to all the fallout from Terence Green in just a moment. But McLaughlin Gardner is McLaughlin something. We'll go with McLaughlin Gardner is a verbal commitment to the Ducks now. 3-star defensive lineman out of Liberty High School in Peoria, Arizona, not Liberty High School in Nevada, where freshman Anthony Jones and Sir Mells, another defensive lineman, are from. 6'2", 275. So not like a huge guy, but like obviously big enough to be there on the interior. I think he'd be a candidate to maybe bulk up a bit and play strictly on the interior of the defensive line, but just a 3-star guy. But Oregon got him over some pretty notable schools here. Chose the Ducks over Cal, really good defensive team year in and year out. That's the smaller brand of teams that are there. Michigan, Texas, Wisconsin were all in the running. Now, Michigan and Wisconsin, along with Cal to an extent, have high-level defenses, so that's the sort of player that he is, and those are the schools that were after him. But he becomes Oregon's 4th defensive line commitment in the class of 2023. It's now Terence Green, Tavita Pamee, another big 3-star guy from the state of Utah, Tatum Tuiodi, who I don't think I mentioned here on the show, 3-star edge player from Sheldon High School, and I believe the son of Tony Tuiodi, our defensive line coach, who comes over from Nebraska. And Gardner becomes the 13th commitment for the Ducks in the class of 2023. I think that number will be closer to 20 by the time it's all said and done. but it's number 15 nationally in the 24/7 composite. You've got 8 4-stars in there. He's one, or yeah, that's right, 8 4-stars, 4 3-stars, and then Dante Moore, the headline recruit, as a 5-star. So Gardner is the latest guy to commit there. But I want to transition into something I thought about, and the potential ramifications of Terence Green committing, and now Gardner does kind of expand upon the thoughts here. But Terence Green, 4-star defensive lineman, highest rated recruit in the trenches that Oregon's gotten so far in 2023. I think he's got like a 90.3 something composite rating on 24/7 Sports, which is pretty darn solid. To me, Terence Green reminds me a lot of Brandon Dorlus, who himself is 6'2", 270. Green is a little taller, right? He's 3 inches taller, actually. He is 6'5", 265. I heard some people compare him to DJ Johnson, but DJ Johnson's 240 pounds. I think, he's a guy who can play kind of that outside linebacker in a 3-4. I don't think that that's what Green can do, even though he's taller, unless maybe he wanted to slim down. But I think he's a candidate with where Oregon's position groups are at to bulk up and play on the interior of the defensive line. I wonder if he'll stay at that weight, or maybe they want to put on, 20, 25, or 30 pounds to him, this year. And by the time he gets to Oregon, and have him, be a Jordan Scott style of player, right? He was 330, I think, when he got to Oregon's campus, but somebody who can just kind of swallow up double teams there. Green's got great size and is a physical player, not super explosive, which is why I bring in the Jordan Scott comparison. Not a super big get off guy, right? His get off is not really, really fast. He's not super agile in that sense. So he might be a candidate to be a body in the middle who, swallows up a double team when he can and tries to get a push on the interior. But he does remind me of Dorlus in the sense that, he's at a similar weight, 270 for Dorlus, 265 for Green right now, where he could play on the interior or on the outside. But I think he might be better suited to be on the interior. He said, this is a quote from Terence Green in July, "They see me as a stud end," which is great because that's what the NFL wants to see from guys. So clearly that was part of the recruiting pitch here is, the sort of position that he'd play and how that might transition to playing at the next level. But a stud end is basically someone who, at least my understanding, is it's somebody who, moves around a little bit, right? And has that sort of versatility to go inside and out, maybe line up over a guard sometimes, occasionally over the center, but really over a guard or over a tackle. But Green had offers from Michigan State, Miami, USC, and Texas again. So a couple defensive linemen thought about Texas, instead decided to come to Oregon there. But I think the biggest thing with Terence Green from a recruiting standpoint is not that he chose the Ducks over Texas, but that he comes from the state of Texas. I am a big fan of going and recruiting the Lone Star State pretty hard. And I think the previous staff, was in Florida a lot, but this staff has more ties with guys like Matt Powledge, and Lanning is from that footprint, having spent time at Georgia and Alabama down there in the South. So far, 3 of the 13 commitments are from the state of Texas, that being Tyler Turner, Ashton Cozart, and Terence Green. Not a coincidence that those are all 4-star guys who figured to be starters and regular contributors during their careers at Oregon. So the class is up to 13 commitments, and you've got or 13 commitments and 15th best nationally. I still think that can go higher. And I don't think they should be done yet recruiting the defensive line. I don't think they should be close to that. I'll tell you why after I tell you about Bet Online, the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your betting needs. Find all your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. Find reviews and news of every league, including Major League Baseball. Go Mariners. Just took 2 or 3 from the Yankees. I'm having a good day. NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all your sports wagering information. From live in-game betting, scores, and podcasts, they have you covered. Head to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to learn more about the action happening. BetOnline, where the game starts. So on the defensive line, I like these guys, right? I think they have some potential there. Green, obviously, more so than the other defensive linemen Oregon's gotten, but you never know when three-star guys pop and play like high four or five-star caliber players. It happens every now and then, and that's certainly part of your football program is being able to develop guys and get more out of them than maybe what you forecast when they originally commit. And I like these additions. I like that bodies are getting there because Oregon could quite frankly start to be short on those going into 2023. But much like the GIF that's out there of Kylo Ren shooting at what he thinks is Luke Skywalker, but is actually just a hologram projection of Luke Skywalker, more. We still want more. Because after this season, I believe Casey Rogers and Jordan Riley, who are the Nebraska transfers, they're done. Popo and Dorless probably going to be on the move. Like it's going to be a thin group. Don't know what Taimani's going to do. I think this is a great start for the defensive line. I think it's a solid place to be. I'm still looking at names like David Hicks, Samuel Mpemba, Mateo Uyunglele. I really want to see them get one of those 5 stars. I think that's part of the promise that you build up for fans like us when you bring in a coach like Dan Lanning and hire a defensive coordinator like Tosh Lupoy, who's been a Pac-12 Recruiter of the Year, and Lanning just helped build one of the best defenses ever in college football at Georgia. I think you got to be able to get one of those guys, and I've talked about him extensively here on the show. Going to continue to do that because I'd like to see one of those guys as kind of an anchor piece for the defensive line going forward. You do have Anthony Jones and Sir Mel's guys I mentioned earlier, both 3-star recruits who we'll see how they play or if they play at all this year. But I want to see more bodies on the offensive line from a recruiting standpoint because I think it's just where the roster is at, right? I want to look at names like Amari Washington, who is a 4-star defensive line. Just try and pile up the 4 stars, right? When you look at the best defensive lines in the conference or really in the country, it's just loaded with 4 and 5-star guys, right? And you don't have to have 5 stars across the board. Nobody's got that, but you got to go after those kind of blue chip prospects. Green is definitely the most significant of these commitments so far, and he could be playing early in his career because of the depth that I'm talking about here. I think the Ducks could be short on bodies of the defensive line going into 2023, depending on who decides to come back and what the eligibility situation is looking like there. But much like offensive line, I think scholarship bodies could just kind of be in short supply going into next year. A name to follow as well on the defensive front, right? We talk about the transfers, Riley and Rogers, and Taimani as well, Popo and Dorless. We know what to expect from them this season. Look out for a name like Keon Ware Hudson, who was banged up a little bit last year, didn't play in the bowl game, former 4-star recruit. I wonder if he is able to pop and find a lot of playing time, or frankly, if they're able to keep him around here at the program, as we call it now, of course, thanks to our coach Dan Lanning. But I wonder if there aren't going to be too many bodies this year for him to see the field a lot, and if they're able to keep him around, I'd like to keep him on the roster because, like I said, you got to just pile up guys who have the physical ability to at least be solid, right? To have a push to be at least moderate impact players. So I think following Keon Ware Hudson on the defensive line is a worthwhile endeavor. Let's switch over to the mailbag now. A couple questions coming in, and again, I won't be able to answer these live, quote unquote, on the show for a couple weeks while I'm on vacation. But if you want to just shoot me a message, again, at smalls_55, at Locked On Ducks, or the Twitter handles, slide up in the DMs. You can hop in the YouTube comments as well. I should be able to monitor those consistently as I usually do. Interact with you on there. I'll send you messages. Just know that today's the last day to do that. So these two guys are getting their questions in before the break because they've been listening, and I've been mentioning that upcoming trip here for a little bit here on the show. Question from Cameron Derby, who comes in via the Twitter DMs and friend of the show. Question/convo for Locked On Ducks. In this case, it'd be a monologue, technically. I'm just kidding. But how important is it that Dan Lanning is so gung-ho, great term, about Nike and the Oregon brand? I'm just noticing that he brags on it, speaks to it, and wears it in a different way than any modern Oregon coach has. Obviously, it's a selling point to the realignment, but man, it seems like recruits are responding to it too. Important to have a head coach who embraces everything about your brand. He also talked about how how Lanning's been wearing the shoes a lot. I've seen some people point that out. I mean, it's a good sign, right? I mean, you want to see this sort of stuff from your head coach. And I talked about when he got hired, the way he was making an effort to, get on the side of the alumni who, penned that letter to Rob Mullins talking about, maybe we need an Oregon guy here. Lanning coming in and wanting to make that effort. Would a lot of coaches do it? Sure. Would every coach do it? No. That is a very important distinction. Not every coach wants to be all what's the term I'm looking for here? Lovey-dovey in a sense with boosters and alumni, and they just want to show up and coach football, and that's all they want to do, and they don't want to be a part of it or be a man or a person of the school that they are representing that is employing him as their head coach, right? A good example of this is Brian Harsin down at Auburn. Boosters never really wanted him. He hasn't gotten along with them super well. There's been some friction in that community down there over the last several months, and it can lead to very real ramifications. There was a point where Auburn fans were asking, like, because this is so tense and there's not a buy-in or a symbiotic relationship between alumni and donors and the head coach, are they going to just move on from Brian Harsin? And look, they might move on after this year if they go out and only win 5 or 6 games. And so I think it's an encouraging thing to see. I don't think it's a major revelation necessarily, but I do think that he reinforces it every time he gets in front of a microphone. Seemingly, he's saying like Oregon's a national brand, and they're really good at this, and they're great at that, and we're proud of this, and he wants to be a man of Oregon in some sense. Like, I have no idea. Someone asked a question recently, like, how long do you think he'll stay? I don't know. Like, too many other factors have to come into play to be able to answer that question thoroughly and honestly. But I think what he's showing right now is he wants us all to be behind him. He wants everybody to be behind him. The fans, the alumni, the parents, the players, like everybody that's involved with a college football program. He wants them to be all in on him at the University of Oregon. And look, I can't get on here and guarantee that it'll be around for 10 years. But if he were to ultimately stay for a long time at Oregon, this is kind of how it would start, right? This was never the vibe with Chip. He was never into that sort of stuff, and talking up the school or talking up the football program. That was a program that Chip ran. This is a program that Dan Lanning's running now. He wasn't as into that, and Chip left after 4 years. And look, Mario talked it up plenty. I don't remember him doing it quite as aggressively as Lanning has made an effort to do here over the last several years. But I enjoy seeing it because it means that he is truly excited about being here and wants the opportunity, is excited about it, and recognizes the chance he has to succeed, which is ultimately at the end of the day what we all want. And yeah, it's part of the recruiting pitch too. You got to be all in on your school, or you're not going to be able to get recruits to commit. And we're seeing, I think, the fruits of that labor starting to pay off. Next question comes from Marco Hammock. This one was like kind of a question ish. So there was an ongoing YouTube comments thread about the Utah games last year and Oregon just getting smacked around on game days from a schematic standpoint, which is the only way to explain a 76-17 two-game beatdown against a team that you top to bottom have better recruits than, but you're just getting outcoached and outdeveloped, frankly, because Utah is kind of the master program in the Pac-12 at taking a 3 or a 4-star and making them play well above what people expected them to when they initially committed to play college football. So he said, and don't forget Coach Cristobal is again talking about the Utah game. Yep, even though heavy with talent, much as Oregon was and is, he will still play the short pass and run. Defenses soon figure it out. Miami will affair of games. I don't think that was. I think that's called a typo. But not national caliber football. This is an interesting question. We saw that last year. Let's be glad he's gone and have a new coach that wants to mix it up. I know he has to prove himself, but I believe once again we're on the right track. Let Miami have him. Personally, I don't think he's all that. Great recruiting, but coach, you tell me. All right, I will tell you here, Marco. I saw the same shortcomings in Mario Cristobal's X's and O's on any given Saturday as you all did. I was there. I saw them. They didn't blow out teams they should have. They lost games they should not have. Every team loses games that they shouldn't have lost, but there were too many close games, and I think that was a schematic and philosophical reflection of Mario Cristobal being the head coach and the coaching staff that was there. Should we be glad that he's gone? I think it's too early to say because I watched Mario Cristobal win a lot of football games. I mean, that's just a fact. He won a lot of football games while at Oregon. And like, oh, well, he's not that great of a coach, but he is a great recruiter. In college football, you cannot differentiate the two because of the way that this wonderful, beautiful sport is structured. Part of being a head coach is how you are as a recruiter. You can evaluate different elements of a coach's capability and say he's good at this, but he's not as good at that. But recruiting is part of coaching at the college ranks. It is part of coaching. Like when I think who's a good coach, I think about whether or not he is a good recruiter and whether or not he is good schematically and like all that sort of stuff, right? It all factors in, but everyone I think kind of has a tendency to separate the two. But in college football, recruiting is like 80% of the battle. So he's going to go to Miami, and I think he'll win games. Will he get him to a college football playoff? Maybe. I mean, he got Oregon darn close in a pretty weak Pac-12. He's in a pretty weak ACC right now, and he's going to have some stacked recruiting classes at Miami because he has more talent in his backyard down there in Florida than he had up at Oregon, right? So they're already recruiting at a high level. That's going to continue. We shouldn't be shocked by that or resentful of it. I am, however, encouraged by what Dan Lanning and the staff have done on the recruiting trail so far, because if they stay at this level and they're able to be better schematically than Mario was, then yes, Lanning's ceiling as a head coach, I think could be higher than Mario's. I think that's 100% true. However, that remains to be seen because every coach is going to have an area that they struggle with. Every single coach, all of them in football ever has something that fans always point to as like, yep, he's really good at this, but he's not as good at that, right? Go back to Chip Kelly. What was Chip really good at? Scoring points. Did we ever have an elite defense? Nope. They were also put in a bad spot because they were on the field all the time because of the tempo that the offense played at, but that was a weakness. Chip had another weakness. He's recruited smaller offensive linemen who were nimble enough to run his schemes, and that was very effective. But you ran into teams like LSU, like Auburn, like Stanford, who had big, physical, imposing defensive linemen, and the Ducks could struggle to run the ball or pass protect at a high level. But that doesn't mean Chip should have changed what he did or what was working for him. It just means that every single coach has an area you can point to and say he's not as good at that. Helfrich, for instance, don't think of him as a great recruiter or a big relationships guy. But from an X's and O's offensive standpoint, yeah, I think he knew what he was doing. When Helfrich went in that 4-8 season, go look at the numbers. The defense is what took a nosedive in a significant way with Brady Hoke. It was really, really bad. But the offense was still able to score points. Like that element was never lost. And so when people are talking about, like, oh, let Miami have it, I'm glad he's gone. Right now, it's Schrodinger's cat, which, if you don't know, is a historic scientific experiment and thought exercise that basically says a cat is in a box. You put a cat in a box, and until you open that box, you can think of the cat as both dead and alive. Dan Lanning right now can be thought of as both a better coach or a worse coach than Mario Cristobal. We won't know until we see the product on the field. I can say right now, Mario's a better recruiter than Dan Lanning right now. That could change one day. I don't know. That stuff has to be given time to play out. And am I optimistic that Lanning and this staff can be smarter schematically, particularly on the defensive side of the ball, but offensively too, than what the previous staff had in terms of their shortcomings, right? We can't look at that team like don't fall into the recency bias trap of the last 4 weeks of the season and say, look, that staff was terrible schematically. Even if you recruit at a high level, you can't be incompetent schematically and win football games. You cannot reach your ceiling based on recruiting if you don't have elite play callers or elite X's and O's or game plans and stuff like that. But you can't win that many football games and be a total train wreck in that sense. You have to have some base level of competency and understanding of how to win football games and make adjustments, which Mario did not do against Utah. That is 100% true. Like it was the same sort of script. We couldn't stop Utah's offense, and our offense couldn't move the ball. And so, am I optimistic that Lanning, given where he's coming from, is going to be able to be a better defensive play caller than Tim DeRuyter and still have plenty of talent? Yes, I am. But do I know that that's the case right now? No. I don't know if from an X's and O's standpoint, Oregon will be better this year than they were last year. I think they will be, but you have to let that stuff play out. And I've seen Oregon fans talk about this a number of times before. I think it's really encouraging that right now it looks like the recruiting will, gosh, hardly take a dip with this staff and who's been assembled. And I think that's really big because that was kind of the biggest concern when Mario left for Miami. It's like, well, whoever you're going to bring in, is he going to be able to recruit the way Mario did? Because now we've seen the potential for Oregon football in the recruiting sense. But are you going to be able to have a staff that can stay at least really close to that level? And it looks like Lanning and company are going to be able to do that. I mean, they haven't even coached a game, and maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that's a bad thing for recruiting. They've already gotten Dante Moore, the highest rated quarterback commit in Oregon history. So I'm encouraged and optimistic right now. But at the end of the day, some of this stuff has to play out before you can make a determination. I think Lanning can be better than, and this staff can be better than the previous one. I do, because the other one had shortcomings, and I think that they're very fixable. But that's not a guarantee that it is going to happen. And the season's less than 30 days away, so we'll just have to wait and find out. I appreciate everyone listening. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.